Apparently I read 14 books this month. I actually don't even know how that happened because that's more than usual for me, but I felt like I was busier than usual, so I don't know, but we have 14 books to talk about. Some quick stats because I always feel like this is so fun. Like I said, I read 14 books total. I read 2 mystery, 7 romance, 1 fantasy, 1 non-fiction, and 3 dystopian. The dystopian is a bit out of character for me, but I had a fun time with those. I also read quite a few library books and a few Kindle books, so I don't have as many physical copies to share with you guys today, but I read 6 library books, 2 Kindle books, and 6 physical books. So let's get into it. So my first 2 reads for the month were The Vanishing, Stair, and The Hand on the Wall, which are the second 2 books in the Truly Devious trilogy. So I read Truly Devious last month, and then I read the other 2 books this month. I rated The Vanishing Stair 4 stars and The Hand on the Wall 4.25. And if you remember, I rated Truly Devious 3.75. So in my opinion, the books progressively got better as the series went along. And I honestly just think this series is so much fun. I heard someone say recently, you're either a Truly Devious girly or you're a Good Girl's Guide to Murder girly. And I enjoyed A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, but I think I'm a Truly Devious girly. There is just something about that kind of academic setting. Having a book set in like a school or a college or something like that just is so atmospheric to me. And I just really enjoyed how that was done in Truly Devious because they had these beautiful grounds, but they also went off the grounds and, you know, into the town and like did other things. And a lot of the characters shared, it's almost like a dorm, but it's more like a house, but it's kind of like dorm life, but they have like co-ed dorms, and having that aspect of lots of the characters living together I really enjoyed. But yeah, honestly, the series is just so fun. It is YA mystery, I think, technically. It's not really thrillery, like it's not creepy, I wouldn't say, but you really do just have that I really want to know what's going to happen type of feeling throughout the whole book. And also something that I really enjoyed about this series is that there is this mystery set up in the first book. So you know that there is this mystery that you're trying to figure out the answer to, but the characters are trying to solve this mystery, this like one main mystery, over the 3 books. So it's not like you have one mystery in book 1, a different mystery in book 2, and a different mystery in book 3. Like it's one overarching mystery, but there are other characters and other mysteries that are kind of like subplots that kind of get added throughout the series. So in book 2, maybe some more characters get added, another little subplot gets added, or like you find out some more details about the overarching mystery that you didn't know previously, so now you have to figure out those details before you can figure out the main mystery. And it's just really well done. I felt like it just had a lot of depth to it, and it kept me interested the whole time. Like I was really wanting to know the whole time, just all of the secrets. I love a good YA mystery because they are just such an adventure. I feel like the next book I read on my Kindle, and it was Travis by Sheridan. I feel like I've said this a million times, but my current favorite book is Archer's Voice. I read it about a year ago, and I just fell in love with Archer and Bree and their stories. And if you don't know, it's a small town romance. And in Archer's Voice, there is a character called Travis, who is Archer's cousin. I guess he kind of is like the bad guy in Archer's Voice. But Sheridan wrote him his own book, so I was really interested to read it and kind of see his redemption story, if you will. It was really fun to get back to that small town that we'd already read about and kind of like set up in Archer's Voice. You guys know I love a small town romance because of the found family. So you still get aspects of that found family that you previously got in Archer's Voice, but you get some new characters, you get some new settings and some new like parts of the town that you didn't see previously. And it was just really nice reading like a kind of familiar but still very different story. I wouldn't necessarily call it a sequel to Archer's Voice. It does happen multiple years after Archer's Voice is set, and so I feel like it's more of a companion novel, but I would highly recommend only reading it after you've read Archer's Voice, because there's a lot of things that are just like expected that you know and understand, and Travis's story is so intertwined, I guess, with Archer's, that if you don't know the story of Archer's Voice, it's going to be hard for you to fully get the depth in Travis. So if you liked Archer's Voice and you want to see more of that town, more of those characters, you do get to see more of Bree and Archer. If you want all of that, I definitely recommend Travis. I don't think it's quite as good. I rated it 4 stars, but it was just a really nice romance. A bit of like they get off on the wrong foot and then they slowly kind of get to know each other a little bit more when they kind of give each other a second chance, if you will. Then I read Ivy by Willa Nash, which is also a Kindle book. Both Travis and Ivy are on Kindle Unlimited, and Ivy is unlike any book I've ever read. Pretty much everyone that I've heard talk about it describes it as a mix between Pretty Little Liars and Gossip Girl, and I feel like that is genuinely the best way to describe it. Like, that is the epitome of what it is. It is Pretty Little Liars cross Gossip Girl. So this book is told from multiple POVs. It's technically, apparently, a romance book. Like, when I looked up what genre it's technically classified as, it's under romance, but I would almost argue that it's more of like a romance mystery, and I was much more interested in the mystery aspects than the actual romances. It's a lot of every character kind of has secrets, and there's like family dynamics involved. Obviously there's romance involved, but it's just your classic, everyone has secrets and they're slowly kind of getting revealed as the book progresses, which is always just so interesting. I feel like it's also written in a way where you just want to keep reading. It's over 500 pages, but I flew through it because I was just like, I just need to know what's gonna happen. I also rated this one 4 stars. I had quite a few 4-star reads this month, but it was just so freaking interesting. It definitely has a decent amount of spice in my opinion, so obviously be aware of that if you're going to pick this one up. And I think my main, this is so dumb, but my main pet peeve with this book was there was one romance between 2 characters where the guy called the girl baby, and it was just done in such a cringy way. I honestly find it very difficult to not have that be a super cringy thing in books, but this one was just extra cringy. Like, every time he said it, I was like, please stop. Because it would be the classic, like, she's mad at him, and then he'd be like, oh, baby, and she'd be like, oh, I just can't help myself when you call me that. I'm like, no, absolutely not. That is not how we solve conflict here. But anyway, it's fine. It's just a personal pet peeve of mine. If you call someone baby in a book, I'm annoyed. No matter how good the plot is, I'm kind of put off. Okay, next we have my favorite book of the month, and the first book that I've rated 5 stars in like 2 months. These Hollow Vows. This was so good. The reason I originally picked this up is because someone described it as a more YA version of ACOTAR, and it has no spice. And you guys know I freaking love ACOTAR, so of course I went and picked this up. And look, I understand why it is compared to ACOTAR, and when I was looking through a lot of other reviews, there is also a lot of comparison to The Cruel Prince, but I feel like it's a bit unfair to kind of call this the love child of ACOTAR and The Cruel Prince, because it's just its own book in its own right. Like, I understand that there were similarities, but I feel like a lot of YA fantasy follows a decently similar storyline. For someone to kind of compare it to ACOTAR, I'm like, you could compare so many books to ACOTAR. And a lot of people were kind of mad in the reviews that I was reading that it was too similar to ACOTAR, which I actually don't agree with. I feel like it just had its own storyline, it had its own characters. In this book, you have Bree, who lives with her sister, and they basically live in poverty. Bree is the oldest sibling, so she feels very protective over her younger sibling, and then her sister literally gets kidnapped. And so obviously Bree ends up on this quest almost to try and rescue her sister. She finds out who has kidnapped her, and they basically give her these tasks that she must complete in order to get her sister back, and that's where the story kind of falls. If anything, I would say it's more of an ACOTAR meets The Selection, and if you read this, you'll get why I say that. But I just really enjoyed it. It was adventurous, it was fast-paced, the characters were really likable, it still had a few kind of like twists and turns, and overall it was just a good time to me. Like I said, I rated this 5 stars, and there is a sequel coming out July 26th, I think. I've got it marked on my calendar because I'm so excited to read the second book. If it's anything like this one, I think I'm going to be obsessed. And I just don't understand why this book doesn't have more hype, because I feel like it truly deserves way more hype than at least what I've seen on the internet so far. Next, I read Bridgerton, the first book in the Bridgerton series, which is called The Duke and I. And this was a really fun time. I rated it 3.75. It wasn't like the best book I've ever read, but I just had a fun time reading it. If you haven't heard about Bridgerton, I feel like you've been living under a rock. It's historical romance, and I've actually watched the first season of Bridgerton. I haven't watched the second season. I just never got into it. But the first season of Bridgerton, the TV show, is based on the first book in the series. And I was really pleasantly surprised with how much the book aligned with the TV show. Like, the TV show did such a great job adapting that book. I'm really excited to read the next book in the Bridgerton series. I think it'll be a fun series just to slowly work my way through. Next, I picked up Too Late by Colleen Hoover. And I did not know how to feel about this for so long after I finished it, because it was just interesting. It was just very different from her other books. This one is also free on Kindle Unlimited as well if you don't want to buy a physical copy, but you do want to check it out and you have a KU subscription. I just don't know. This is technically classified as, like, if you go onto Colleen Hoover's Instagram, she has this little graphic made up that kind of gives you a brief genre of her books. And this one is outlined in red, which I think means like mature romance or dark romance or something along those lines. And I have never read a dark romance. They they just don't really appeal to me. But I already had the physical copy of this and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna check it out. Like, it'll be interesting to read a dark romance and just see what I think. After reading it, I still don't think it's for me. I really had no idea what to rate this after I finished it, but I ended up giving it 3 stars. And here's my reasoning. Honestly, the book was written well. It did what it was supposed to do. This book is basically about a girl who is stuck in an abusive relationship, so definitely trigger warnings for that. She's stuck in this abusive relationship. It is like physically, verbally, emotionally abusive, but she basically can't get out because he just holds all of this power over her. And if she leaves, she's just gonna lose so much. And so she feels like she's stuck there. And the guy who she's in a relationship with owns this huge house and he is uber duper rich because he is basically like the head of a drug circle at his college and the college that she goes to as well. And so they live in this big house that he is like in charge of and he lets lots of other people live there. And so there are always people like going in and out of this house. And one day this guy shows up and she doesn't realize it at the time, but he's actually an undercover cop there to basically get enough evidence to convict this drug dealer. And then she starts falling for him, he starts falling for her, but she's stuck in this relationship still. And also the undercover police officer can't really, well, firstly, he shouldn't be falling in love with her, obviously, but he also needs to continue like staying in this house and like staying in this situation because he still needs to collect enough evidence. So as much as he wants to like kind of save her and take her away from this whole thing, he needs to stay and she kind of needs to stay too because she has so much information, and it's just this like whole huge messy situation. And so like, yes, it is a romance, but there's just so much ickiness in it, obviously, because you read about all of this abuse and just how badly she is treated, and it's so heartbreaking to see someone who is stuck in this awful situation. And so that just made it so hard to read. And obviously Colleen Hoover writes this like drug dealer guy as an awful character and you hate him obviously, but you still have to like read all about him, and I just hated that. So although the book is written in a way where you're supposed to hate the guy, it's just not a pleasant experience. So I know it was written well because the point got across, but I just didn't enjoy the experience, and it's just not something I would recommend to other people. And also my little pet peeve with this is like, if you see the book, I've got a little bookmark here. This is the actual story. This whole thing is epilogue. That whole thing. So you have the epilogue 2/3 of the way through the book, and then you have a prologue after the epilogue, and then you have epilogue to the epilogue. Story, epilogue, prologue, epilogue to the epilogue. Sorry, but that's just a no from me. That is just a straight up no from me. It was just such an interesting reading experience. So obviously if what I've described sounds really good to you, if you like dark romance, if you like suspense romances, I feel like go for it, but it's never going to be a book that I reread personally. Then we have The Truth About Love by Masie Myers. This was sent to me by my beautiful friend Ali. Guys, I am shocked that this does not have more hype, and like all the credit goes to Ali obviously for getting me on this bandwagon. But if you haven't read this, I definitely recommend it. I feel like it could be on KU, and it's not the easiest to get your hands on. Like, I don't think they have this in any bookstores. You can get it on Amazon. Yes, okay, it's free on Kindle Unlimited if you guys want it. In this story, you have Summer Rain, or Summer for short, who moves to Florida with her family, and she's new at her high school, and she meets Auden, who is a guy just like in her grade, and he is intrigued right off the bat. Like, he sees her and he's like, I want to know who that is. So he introduces himself, they get to know each other. I feel like it is a bit of like a friends to lovers sort of situation, but it's like your classic first love, like soulmate kind of love. But Summer deals with a lot of mental health. Trigger warning for this one: depression, self-harm, definitely be aware of that. And so the first part of this book is them just falling in love as teenagers, having this beautiful love story. It's so lovely to read. And then something happens. They get separated. She kind of goes to find him, kind of pick up where they left off, and she realizes that he has married someone else. And I'm not ruining anything, that is literally on the back of the book. It's kind of like the whole premise of the story. And so now she's like, what the heck, my first love has gotten married to someone else. And you get to read about it from Auden, the guy's point of view, and you get to see why he made the decision that he did. And I feel like this book is just all about, is love enough to overcome all? Because I feel like so many books, it's like, oh my gosh, they fell in love and it solved all their problems, or they fell in love but then they had this conflict over something, but then their love was so strong and love always wins. And like, yes, kind of, but life is just not that simple, and love just doesn't solve all your problems. And I feel like this book really showcased that well, and it gave a very realistic look into what being in love is like when you have depression and how that can kind of alter your perception and kind of make decisions for you, you know? I definitely recommend this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was a phenomenal read to me, and it also just was so easy to read. I read 100 pages of this in one sitting, which is very unusual for me. I just loved it, and I'm really excited to see more from this author when she releases more books, hopefully. I'm assuming she will. Then we have The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. This was a very feel-good romance. It wasn't super heavy, and it didn't like break and shatter my heart, especially after reading this. I was like, I just need something lighthearted and fun, and this was exactly what I was in the mood for. It's pretty short. It's like 300 pages. What did I end up reading it? I gave it 4 stars. It was really fun, like I said, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, that was the best book I've ever read, you know? This is a friends to lovers, fake dating. It's kind of the classic, they've been in love with each other their whole lives, but they refuse to admit it. And so yes, this whole book could have been solved very quickly with just a, hey, just want to let you know that I like you. But of course it doesn't happen that way. I will say, this book felt like it was like 450 pages, and I don't understand why. Like, this book is pretty much like 450 pages, but it felt like 300. This is 300 pages, felt like 450. You know how some books just are so easy to fly through? This was just not the case. I will say, I've had a few people say, oh, I started this book and I just like didn't get into it and I stopped reading it. I will say that it definitely gets better as you go along. And I found myself just like smiling this whole book because it was just so wholesome and cute. So I feel like this is the perfect, I'm going on a vacation and I just want something chill to read that's not gonna literally shatter my heart into a million pieces. Yeah, this is the one for you. Next, I read the Legend trilogy. So the first book is Legend, the second book is Prodigy, and the third book is Champion. This is a YA dystopian trilogy, but I had honestly never heard of this until maybe a few months ago. It was put on my radar, I think, when Hayley Pham read the first book in one of her videos. And when I heard her talk about it, I was like, that just sounds super interesting. And then like a month or two later, I heard my friend Ella, Smiley Citrus, say that she read, I think, the first book, and she said it was really good. And I was like, okay, I definitely need to check this out. And guys, this series is so fun. I feel like if you want to feel the same feelings that you felt when you read Divergent or The Hunger Games as like a teenager, but obviously you don't want to reread a story that you already know, read this trilogy, because it gives the same vibe, but it's still a very different story. In this dystopian world, there is a plague that is attacking a lot of people. So also, if COVID and lockdowns and quarantining triggers you, maybe don't read this series. But yeah, there's this plague that is hitting the world and they don't really know what to do or how to solve it, and the government is just doing some sketchy things. And some people are kind of questioning what is really going on with this whole plague, because it seems like a lot of the poor people are dying from the plague and a lot of the rich people are not. And in the story, you get to hear from two perspectives. You have Day, who is a teenage boy, and he is kind of like from the poor sectors. And you also hear from June, who has kind of been raised in some of the rich kind of areas, and she kind of works for the government. So Day is kind of like a rebel, I guess you could say. And you get to see this story from obviously 2 point of views, and then there gets a point where these two characters meet, and then you get to see the interactions that follow and kind of them trying to figure out who is actually the good guy, who is the bad guy, what is actually going on with all of this stuff. And it's just super interesting. So I had a really fun time reading this. It is really, really, really fast paced. There's always something going on. It's adventurous, it's fun, there is romance, there's kind of like mystery elements because you're trying to figure out like where this plague has come from and how it's all going down. There's family dynamics, a little bit of found family too. I rated all 3 of the books 4 stars because yes, they're super fun and they were super good, but I think my only criticism would be that I felt like it could have had a bit more depth to it. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Next we have Alex Approximately. This was so fun. I did not expect to like this book as much as I did. It's been sitting on my shelf for like a couple months now, and I've heard so many people rave about it, but for some reason I was like, I don't know if it's gonna be for me, and it really was. I gave this 4.25 stars. I honestly thought it was gonna be like almost a 5-star read for the first like 2/3 of it, and then the last third was like okay, but it just wasn't as good as I was hoping it would be, and it was just a little bit frustrating with how things were kind of like resolved, and I feel like it could have been resolved a little bit quicker. But overall, I really enjoyed it. This is a YA romance. It's kind of about a girl who moves to this small beach town, and she's been talking to this guy online who she knows lives in this small beach town, but he doesn't know that she has moved to his small beach town. So she's kind of trying to like secretly scope him out and like find him, because they've both been talking to each other under like fake internet names. So she's trying to like meet all these people and kind of figure out if any of them are the guy that she was talking to online, because she obviously has feelings for him but kind of just wants to scope things out in person. And so you just get to read about her trying to like find this guy, and while she's trying to find this guy that she met online, she starts talking to this other guy that she works with, and she kind of starts having feelings for him. But then it's this whole like, but I really like this guy that I've talked to for so long online, but now I kind of like this other guy, and it's this whole battle between what is she gonna do. But it just gave all of the perfect summer beach town vibes. You also just get to read about her doing like fun summery things and her making friends and working this summer job. I feel like it would be a great summer reading recommendation. We're in winter here in Australia, so I was literally reading this in front of the fireplace in the mountains when it was like 5 degrees, which was not giving the vibes that I wish it was. Maybe if I'd read this in the summer, I would have given it a better rating because I would have been able to fully immerse myself in the story. Like if you're going on a beach vacation, this is the book to bring because I feel like you could fully like get into it. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed this, and this will be definitely one of my top recommendations to people when they ask me for like a fun summer romance book. And then lastly, we've finally made it to the end. My non-fiction book for the month was The Defining Decade by Meg Jay, and this was really, really good. I rated it 4 stars. I think that if you're in your 20s and you just don't really know what you're doing or what you should be doing, this is a great book to read. I've heard so many people say that this book changed their life, and I don't necessarily agree with that, but it definitely was insightful and it gave me a lot of new ways to look at things, I guess. This book is also written by a clinical psychologist, so it is very data based, which I personally love. I don't love it when you read like a self-help book and there's like no data, there are no stats, there is nothing that like for all you know, the author could have just made it up, whereas this is not the case. Like in this book, there's lots of data, lots of analyzing, lots of like real case studies. But yeah, overall, I think it was a really interesting read, but it just wasn't as revolutionary as I think some people make it out to be. But also, I think that's very much down to personal experience. I think some people would be in the place where if they read this, it could change their whole life. But for me, that was just not the case. So definitely still recommend this. I think it would be generally helpful for any 20-something. I'm kind of exhausted. Hopefully that wasn't like 3 hours long, but those are all of my thoughts on all the books that I read in June. I'm hoping that I'll have my July TBR up in a few days' time, so stay tuned for that, and also subscribe if you haven't already so that you don't miss any of my future videos. I would love to know what your favorite book that you read this month was so that I can add it to my future TBR. But I love you guys so much. I hope you have a great day or night whenever you're watching this, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye.